Here's a look at some of the part or assembly replacement snags that can cause SICK constraints, how to avoid them, and how to fix them if they occur. For introductory information about replacing parts and subassemblies in assemblies, please see the Assembly Replace Component Best Case tutorial. The Replace Component feature allows you to replace one file, part, or assembly with another file, part, or assembly. The Replace Component feature will try to retain the assembly constraints, position, and suppression state. It will not retain the configuration used or overwritten color information. If the assembly constraints are unable to be retained, then they will become what is referred to as SICK in the Design Explorer, as shown here. The SICK constraints are always italicized for quick identification. In this case, the geometry of the new green cover is so different from the old red cover that constraints cannot be resolved. The respective edges of each part have slightly different lengths and edge designation numbers. Notice the mate constraints are fine. The green cover was created from the same original silver cover as the red cover was, so that face at least is familiar to their respective mate constraints. To fix the problem, right-click on a SICK constraint, select Edit, select the missing edge, and click on OK. To avoid a problem like this, you could check off Remove Constraints in the dialog box before clicking on OK, in which case you would add all of the constraints back in manually. In a situation like this one, however, where at least one constraint is still intact, it might be easier to leave the Remove Constraints box unchecked and just do a little constraint repair work as shown a few moments ago. The placement options would make no difference in this situation, but would be very helpful in a situation where the new and old parts are very similar, enough to use the same constraints, but each had a different point of origin when created. In this case, retain origins would result in a new part landing in a different position from the old part. If assembly constraints are not removed, the origins and centers will have less impact since the parts will move to the correct location. In situations like this, the Retain Center Points option may work because it lines up the center of the new part's bounding box with the center of the old part's bounding box, ignoring both part origin points. The bounding box is the smallest box parallel to the default planes that will encompass the part. Try to plan ahead when selecting items for constraints. For example, an align constraint would work well with the surfaces of the engine block with either of the silver or red covers. However, the green cover has no matching vertical surfaces. In this case, edges, rather than the aligned surfaces, provided more constraint options for various cover shapes. The above problems can also occur with subassemblies and be addressed the same way, with one major exception. Unlike parts, if an assembly is created from scratch, even if all of the parts and assembly constraints are the same, the assembly constraints will not be retained when it is replaced. Even though all of the parts are the same and all of the assembly constraints are the same, when the subassembly is replaced, none of the assembly constraints between the subassembly and the main assembly are retained. When a file contains multiple part or assembly configurations, the configuration that was active when that file was last saved will be the configuration shown. In this example, the part cover-blue has two configurations. Configuration FL is medium blue in color and has 1-inch fillet around the top. Configuration CH is light blue and has a 1-inch 45-degree chamfer around the top. When the file cover-blue is saved with the CH configuration active, that is the configuration shown when a cover is replaced with the file cover-blue. You may also find sometimes when you bring a file up, there seem to be some missing components. This scenario occurs when an assembly is opened and a part is missing from the design, and this can happen if the part has been deleted or renamed. The assembly knows the retain origin information of the missing part, but it does not know the retain center points, and that's why the second option is not accessible. In this example, LT1 piston was renamed to LT2 prototype from within Windows. When the assembly was opened, the missing design was not fixed. To fix it, in the Design Explorer, right-click on one of the missing parts, in this case it's called Unknown, and select Replace Component. Choose the file LT2 prototype, select all of the instances that are missing, and select OK.